Mississippi synth-punk band are coming through with their debut album here. I enjoy the fact that they are called MSPaint because MSPaint is a really fun name, and what this album actually represents is a pretty fun album that blends some really cool styles together. I've already said synth-punk, but there's also some hardcore coming through on this album as well. We've got even a bit of hip-hop jumping in at times. Screamo as well coming through too. They are one of the boldest breakout bands I think I've heard in a little while, to be honest with you, with their first album just being immediately commanding and holding a presence that just is immediately, instantaneously grabs you. Admittedly, I am late to it because it did come out way back in March, but I am playing a bit of catch up here with some albums, just going back to some ones that I might have missed earlier in the year, and I don't quite want to miss them before the year-end list season comes through officially, because a bit of a spoiler for the rest of the video, I think this is absolutely going to make my year-end list because I have a lot of fun with this album. That punk energy immediately exuberates on the opening track Information, with the smattering drums, the vocals coming through on beat in a kind of rap rock kind of way. I think if you are a fan of hip-hop blended with punk music, which I know has been done quite a lot over the years, to varying degrees of quality, I think you could absolutely be on board with this particular track here because I think it blends the two styles really well together. I think, again, it's just immediately recognizable, it immediately holds your attention, and I'm pretty much on board with it. The synth-punk elements come through a little bit more on Think It Through, a track that has a really repetitive refrain. I actually think the refrain works really well though, although a little bit later on the album we do have the track Hardwired, which for me personally is where the refrain that gets hammered in way too much gets a little annoying, to be honest with you, and I actually find this to be one of the weaker tracks. I think the track itself sounds great, but I just think when you keep hearing that chorus kind of repeated over and over, I get a little bored with it. However, on this particular track, I don't think that issue comes through at all. I think the synth-punk elements work really nicely. I think Selfish Fascination is a really good track too, where it intensifies towards the end and it sounds fantastic. And there are a few moments on this album actually where they just let loose and let rip, and it really brings out such an energy that you don't necessarily get across the rest of the album, and it sounds so cool. Decapitated Reality, I mean, good God, this track goes through so many phases. The screaming elements come through, and then it kind of goes back into the more punk elements, and then at the end it just kind of fizzles into this droney dimension where you feel like you're just going to get sucked into somewhere that you just really don't want to be. And of course as well, Flowers from Concrete, which is the closing track, again has that kind of weird echoey backing vocals that sound super demented and haunting, and the track kind of just again lingers on that as the album closes out, and it's a really chilling, weird, eerie moment to close things out on. Delete It, I think, is kind of the obvious single for this album. Has a bit of a Viagra Boys feel to it. I actually think the chorus is fantastic on this track, probably the most hard-hitting, catchiest chorus on this whole thing. I think there's a lot of plenty catchy choruses on this album, to be fair to them, but I think this one is way more kind of structured in a way that immediately is ingrained in your brain in such a cool way. But again, the drumming across this track is absolutely stellar. You can't really fault the band in terms of performances at all. Post American has to be the track that's the most authentically punk though. I mean, this track is just so in your face with the lyrics. There's lots of tracks across this album that might, work in sort of like symbolic ways to point to certain things that might be metaphors, or is quite obviously talking about the state of society, whereas this one is just way in your face with it and talks about like burning the American flag and things like that. It gets super edgy, I think, but you can see what they're going for. You can see they clearly want to say something and say it boldly and just unashamedly. I think that's, for me, where this album probably could improve going forward though, if they maybe just tidied up some of these lyrics and had a little bit more of an angle, because they do kind of speak in sort of general terms that I think they maybe could just go a bit harder with going forward, maybe being a bit more specific about what they're talking about, and just maybe come through with more creative ways to say what they're saying, because I do think this track goes a little bit too simplistic in terms of its lyrics. At the end of the day though, it is more about the attitude and the energy that these guys bring to the table, and they've got that in spades. You can't take that away from them. They are really bold, like I said, just brash, in-your-face band that have a really, really fun approach to blending so many different styles together in such a cool way. This is a great debut album. I think in terms of where they could go forward in the future, could maybe diversifying things up. I mean, a lot of these tracks I could say one thing for, I could say about another track. They do kind of keep a very similar structure in a lot of their tracks too. I wouldn't really get mad at you if you called this album one note. I personally think it's a really fun album, but you know, for the fact that a lot of the tracks do a similar thing, I'm not really going to get mad at if you personally get a bit bored with that. But for me, I didn't. I think this is really good. I think the fact that it's 30 minutes works well in its favour too, because it's not overstaying its welcome. It's really snappy, it's really straight to the point. And I do think some of the tracks that go a little bit more off the edge and kind of just let loose a bit are really great moments as well. So yeah, very much on board with these guys. I think they're one to watch for the future. And yeah, I think this is great. I'm going 8 out of 10. I think this is a great start to these guys' career. I actually think they could build on this and get even better in the future, which is exciting as well. But for now, very much on board with MSPaint's Post American. If you have heard this already, let me know your thoughts in the comments. It's been out a good while now. I'm probably the last person to be reviewing it in the world. But as always, subscribe, check out more videos, check out my Patreon as well if you want to support me over on there to get more requests in. That would be wonderful. Would love to see that. And tell me your thoughts in the comments. Tell me what I should talk about next before the year end lists come through, because I don't want to miss anything. Have a good day. Goodbye.